and this podcast is for informational and educational purposes only and does not constitute financial advice. Please consult with a qualified financial professional for advice specific to your situation. The views and opinions expressed are those of the hosts and guests and do not necessarily reflect those of the podcast producers or sponsors. We make no representations or warranties regarding the accuracy or completeness of the content. Hi, my name is Bella Carrasco, and helping others feel more comfortable about investing brings a huge smile to my face. I pull together my resources to interview experts in each area of the due diligence process and answer how do you know questions when considering your future financial safety. But that wasn't enough for me. As an ex-collegiate soccer player, I know the parallels that athletes have with everyone else. That is, the fact that we all have several identities and the capability to add more skills to our repertoires, including investment knowledge. For these reasons, I also bring on athletes so that we can learn how they became confident in the investment world and learn the tips that got them there. We go deep into questions about many phases of the investment process, with the goal of helping you go from practice to game time confidently. This is the How Do You Know podcast. Today we are chatting with John Pugh, who was an ex-professional basketball player and now invests in businesses and real estate. So, John, thank you for being on. I always find it helpful to learn how you got to where you are. So can you quickly sum up how you landed on business and real estate acquisitions?
Sure thing. It's great to be on. Thanks for having me, Bella. After basketball, I played basketball professionally in Australia. I had studied finance at Fordham University and went and worked on Wall Street for about 5 years, mostly with institutional traders in stocks and bonds. And I figured out that path in finance wasn't really for me. I then went on to get a Master of Architecture and ended up getting into the field of real estate development. And that helped me to learn being involved in deals. I worked at a large development shop, learned the basics of development, then went out my own with some partners. And that really allowed me to learn how to put together a private equity deal in terms of investing with other partners, operating agreements, etc. And I've since then started looking at other types of opportunities outside of real estate development, still primarily in the real estate development space, but look at other things as well.
So how did you decide that this was the route that you wanted to go down?
There was not a lightning bolt that struck one day that told me that I wanted to go down this route. I think what it really was a series of experiments, I guess you could call them, trials where I had an interest in something, decided that I wanted to explore a potential career path, and that allowed me to get to know that business a little bit better, which then allowed me to expand my network, but also my knowledge of the space. I think really it all started with the basis of understanding finance in general, and I think that has served me really well. But yeah, so it's a series of experiences, both on Wall Street, doing. I was working with institutional traders. I was doing as financial technology startup. One of the companies I work with, and I learned a lot there in sales and account management, and really just kind of have taken that experience and some of the experiences I've had in development and parlay them into the ability to make some investments. So it's been a series of experiences. I think no one particular moment though.
No, I really like how you're framing that, the series of experiences, because I feel like everyone just maybe feels that whatever path they choose at 18 years old when they're deciding their major is the path that they have to choose for the rest of their life.
Yeah.
But as long as you're progressing, as long as there is no inaction, you're still getting closer to the finish line, because if you don't start at all, you're still at the finish line. So life is a journey, right? And we're figuring it out.
Life is a journey, and I think you can't. I remember being kind of hard on myself as a young person, wanting to have it all figured out as quickly as possible, and you realize at some point that it is about the journey. It's about enjoying the journey and finding people you want to spend time with, because that's really what business is spending time with people that hopefully that you like, doing things
Right.
that you enjoy. And so that's allowed me to meet a lot of great people and have some really interesting experiences. So yeah, I don't even think there is a finish line. I don't. I think
Yeah, true.
maybe there's a series of finish lines in terms of milestones or goals that you can attain, but I think hopefully people think of their career as a kind of an ongoing evolution of experiences that allow you to have some fun and do things that are impactful and meaningful for other people and for the world. So
Oh my gosh. Yes, well said. And they do say that you are the top 5 people you spend your time with. So choose it
totally believe
wisely.
that. Believe that 100%. Yeah, for sure.
Hmm. And then transitioning out of working from someone else to then starting your own thing must have been terrifying. So, what gave you the courage to start your own business?
It's funny. It was there were times when it was terrifying, but I don't think I ever quite sat around and thought about it too much. I just kind of did it.
Mm,
It's a challenge. It is a challenge. It's a big challenge to go from point A to point B in terms of working for yourself from the corporate world. But I think if you ultimately, if you really want to do it. So what I did was I took a series of, I took part-time positions. I did consulting roles. I worked as an architect, as a registered architect. So I did a lot of variety of different things to make some money, to allow for me to, but it also helped me gain more experience in the field of real estate development. So, for example, I worked with Consigli Construction for a couple of years while I was building my business. Did some architectural design projects with some friends that are in development. I did fee-based development. So having had a series of those experiences, they just continue to add to my resume, and it allowed me to eventually go out on my own. But there's no one way to do it. I think it's a very personal thing based on your relationships, your network, your situation personally as well. So yeah, it's different for everyone.
I think it's a really good point too, is just being able to get those experiences, and that doesn't mean you have to commit to that career
Yeah.
and go dive deep. If you just get a superficial view of it, then maybe you'll be like, "Ah, actually this isn't for me," and that
Yeah.
saves you a little bit of time.
In that sense, I think it's a lot like sports, right? In athletics, and when you play a sport, and there's seasons, there's games, there's preparation for seasons, preparations for games, and you always know that if you're a player, if you're in that field, you might lose a game, but you just continue on, right? So
Right.
there's no one way to do it, but I think a lot of my experience in athletics helped give me, the perspective and the framework to understand that just keep working on yourself, keep improving yourself, learning about your industry, and you'll get to where you want to be. And I think that to me is exciting for young people that are in sports, that they understand that. To me, that's a really important thing for people to know, that they can use that framework that they've learned in terms of their lens through which they view the world to allow themselves to either grow within a larger company or on their own as an entrepreneur. So
Absolutely. In fact, I just saw a video over the weekend that was saying the best footballers. I played soccer, so
Mhm.
I get a lot of soccer content. But
Yeah.
the best footballers are ones that if they miss a penalty kick, if they have a bad pass, whatever, an error, right?
Mhm.
The best athletes are the ones that can say, okay, that's in the past, that's in my back pocket. How can I move forward?
Oh yeah.
And just having that skill set, mind of a goldfish. I think Ted Lasso taught us that too. Is very important.
Super important that you don't dwell on your mistakes, because you're going to make them. I mean, that's just part of
Absolutely.
the world, and that's okay. And I think that to me is it's funny. Like there's so much conversation about mindset, and I think mindset's very important, but I think it also only goes so far. I think part of it's also our innate personalities. Some people just don't
Yep.
dwell on losses as much as others. And so I feel like, at least for
Right.
me, that's given me both my experience in sports, but also, I mean, the reason I had some of that experience in sports is I like to look forward. I don't spend very much time looking back. I think it's important to stop and look at, kind of take a lessons learned approach after, a major milestone, and look back and regularly kind of review your work. But primarily, I really like to look forward, and I think that
Yep.
helps from a from a from the standpoint of just being the way you see the world. And if you can take that mindset, and like you were just referring to the best soccer players, those people. I saw a very very similar comment about, I think it was Kobe Bryant or Michael Jordan. They were talking about like there's no time, when you're in a game, there's no time to stand around and think about the shot you just missed. You just better run
Yeah.
down the field and play defense, right? So, or the
Yeah.
court and play defense, because you're not. Otherwise, it'll compound, and that's a really interesting thing to me, is
Right.
that like there's this compounding. It can be negative compounding or positive compounding of your experiences and of your wins or losses, and you kind of get to choose. And the more you look forward and try to find and identify positive opportunities for yourself in your career, the more those positive things will compound, and the better the
Right.
result, I think. So
No, yeah. And it's funny, I just got a mental image of Michael Jordan or Kobe Bryant just like pouting on the offensive
yeah,
half of the court. If they like,
right.
what would we think if they did that, you know?
Well, they wouldn't be them, right?
No, exactly.
Yeah, I just remember just watching them go at it, and there was no hesitation. It was just like it was all about, in very similar way I just said, it's all about spotting that opportunity.
And I know we don't like looking back too much, but knowing what you know now, what would you have done differently to start your investment journey?
I think there's different ways to do things. I specifically came from a place where I didn't have that much money. When I went and played overseas, my intent, I remember in college thinking to myself, oh, okay, well, I'll go overseas, I'll make some money. It'll pay for my master's degree. Maybe it'll pay for it'll allow me to give me some investment funds to start my own investments. I wanted to get into investing. Yeah, I thought it was interesting from the beginning. Uh, but I wasn't in that position. It didn't work out that way. And so I ended up going to college and grad school, excuse me, and then coming out and working. And yeah, I mean, there's no one way to do it. I don't think I did necessarily anything wrong. I think if anything, when I first got into it, I would, if I could do something slightly differently, I think it would be to get involved maybe in more deals. I don't know. I think it just
Hmm.
depends. Like if you're in a really tumultuous time like we're in now, like diving into multiple deals at once is probably going to result in something bad, especially if
Right.
you have limited capital. But the timing, that looking back on real estate, in 2000, let's say 2010, when I got out of grad school, it was kind of still in a downturn then, etc. But it was starting to kind of move up over the early years there. Maybe I could have gotten into a few more deals, but I'm happy I was conservative. That's kind of my profile. I mean, development is very risky business. And I tell people all the time, there's no reason to take on more risk than you already have naturally with the market, right? So you always look
Right.
for high quality locations, high quality towns and cities to build in, places, products that are in demand. I think some people that try speculative projects, some people are in a position to do that. They don't really need to care that much necessarily about their financial future, because they're well taken care of. But those just starting out, like, speculation is the quickest way to bankruptcy. So, so
Hmm.
I suggest you take your time, work with, and then also just working with really high quality people. I think,
Yeah.
I've had the fortune to work with some really good, high quality people that don't take shortcuts, that don't look for the easy win, the easy money in your pocket. And I think that to me is the most beneficial thing from the early days till today. I only work with
Yeah.
people. I have a no assholes rule. It doesn't matter. Doesn't
I
matter
like
how
that.
great the deal is, or how much money the person might have to bring to the deal, or whatever. Maybe they have a great piece of property. Like, just no assholes in my deals. That's always my I've run into, you run into plenty of those types of people, unfortunately, in investments, because investments is an field full of ambitious people and a lot of good people. There's nothing wrong with wanting to make money, but there's a lot of people that look to take shortcuts. And just like it does on the field, you take shortcuts in your training, your preparation, you're not setting yourself up for win. So
no, you're actually giving your opponent the advantage there.
100%. You're kind of your own opponent in investments, right? So your ability to be extremely disciplined and not take risks needlessly. I think some of those key pieces are required for success because it's so easy to chase shiny objects because they're everywhere. And so building a portfolio requires a lot of discipline, a lot of focus in terms of not just throwing money into lots of random things. I think you really have to be pretty relentless in terms of your focus, and over time, I think you can build up a nice portfolio. But so much of it requires a lot of discipline and focus that is similar to sports again. So
yeah. And I am definitely a victim of shiny object syndrome. But what I found that helped me was treating my portfolio like a business. So like having a business plan and an outline, a mission and a vision. And it kind of keeps me on track when I veer off a little bit.
Well, yeah. And I think when in defining investments is important, right? So like there's plenty, anyone can go and buy a stock or a bond, really a stock. It's easy to buy a stock on Robinhood or whatever app you might want to use, or crypto. And that can be a good thing. You just buy something over and over and over again. And over time, the value goes up. But when you're investing, especially when you're investing in private businesses and private real estate projects, your ability to really understand that space is like extremely important. So I'm in the real estate development space. I know the ins and outs of how to identify a property, figure out how to get the approvals required to build something, design it, build it, lease it, sell it. Right. That's what I know how to do, and that's in the multifamily space, the industrial space, in the commercial space as well. So when you've had experience in those different pieces, you kind of have to develop an expertise. And understand, kind of stay in your lane, right? Because it's easy here's an example. I had a group of guys wanted to work with me to help them develop some hotels, different parts of the world. And they're nice young guys that are starting a company that I think is generally a good idea, but I don't understand, the concept of building hotels in Central America, in Asia. That's a very detailed, that's a very specific space that I've never been in before, and they, quite frankly, didn't have all that much experience in as well, and so that made me reluctant to want to be involved there, right? So, yes, I know development, but in the end, understanding how to design and construct a building and get approvals for a building is not understanding how to operate a building successfully, right? So operating a hotel successfully is a very specific skill set. So that's just an example of, like, when you get into private investments, you really have to know your space. You have to know the quality and the strength of your team, or the team that you're investing in, their experience. And those pieces really define whether you'll have success or not. It's not like buying Tesla, right, and hoping it goes up. That's a different game, and people play that game very successfully. Really, in my mind, so much of that's won through diversification. But yeah, there's different ways in which you can play in the investment space, but you really have to develop discipline, a focus, so that you can dominate, right? Like, I'm a pretty good athlete, but if I ever showed up on the soccer field, you'd probably kick my butt, right? So.
Maybe we should put that to the test one day.
there we go. Anytime.
Yeah. And yeah, in due diligence, the sponsor is almost the most important part of that process. And earlier you mentioned finding high quality people. So do you have any advice on how to attract them or find them?
Well, yeah, absolutely. You have to be a high quality person, number one.
Oh yeah.
So
I
how can
like
you
that.
invest in yourself, right? In terms of
Yeah.
education, in terms of expertise, in terms of experience, right? So I've had people. I had a person approach me about doing a multifamily development deal in, I think it was Arizona, somewhere like that. And I thought, oh, that's interesting. I'd be interested in doing that. And we started talking, and they had, a piece of land. And the further we got into it, the more I realized that they didn't have any experience operating multifamily properties. They didn't have any
Oh
really
shoot.
much experience even investing in them. And so much of it was kind of relying on me for the expertise and all those pieces. And I had to tell them, no, thank you. But like, that's part of like understanding, like, okay, like I know what
Right.
I know. I know certain parts of a project or a business, and I understand these really well. Who are the people that I need to fill out the project team? So I personally really enjoy that process. It's kind of like picking people for a pickup basketball game, right? Where you say, okay, I'm 6'10", so I'll be the center. We need a point guard, we need a shooting guard, we need maybe a small forward, etc. And so understanding kind of what are the needs to get something approved, what are the needs to get something designed. So understanding who's the architect, who's the civil engineer, who are the what's the legal team in terms of the requirements there for approval, structuring the deal, etc. So yeah, so there's a lot of that, understanding that. And so part of it's, I mean, clearly a big part of it's experience. Has the person done this before? Do they do it regularly? A. And then B, the other part, I think somewhat is intuition. Is this the kind of person I could imagine spending hours and hours on the phone with or in person,
Right.
working on a project that's going to have ups and downs? It's a personality thing. Do I want to hang out with this person? I'm going to get stuck in an
Exactly.
airport with this person for 5 hours. Are they going to annoy the hell out of me, or are they somebody I want to spend time with? Right. So um, I think those pieces are like, people of good character are pretty easy to spot typically. Not always. There's always people that present themselves well, that
Hmm.
maybe aren't what they seem. But yeah, I think really understanding your business, but also referrals too. People that you trust, that in the business. Those people can refer you to other people, and I think that can go wrong if you trust too much and don't verify kind of their
Right.
background and their kind of whether they fit with you or not. But yeah, those are some of the elements that I look for when I'm building a team. Does the person know the space? Do they know what they're doing? And are they somebody I want to spend time with? And it's kind of simple. I think people overcomplicate it. A lot of people looking to get into the space, they maybe, are in a position where they're saying to themselves, okay, I don't know anything, how I'm going to do this. And they're trying to kind of cobble things together. And I think that's okay, but I think you kind of have to find a way to get some experience in the space before you go and try to cobble together a team to do a deal. And it comes back to a little bit of there's a guy that I knew a while back who I've talked to about working together at some point. But his question is always, which I really like to ask as well, is what's my competitive advantage, right? Like, what do I
Right.
offer that other people don't have? And you really have to understand that to be able to find ways, other people who have complementary skill sets or resources. So
Yep. Exactly.
those are important pieces. Yeah,
Yeah, and it's like what you started off by saying is almost like a know thyself, and then you can fill in the gaps around you, which is great.
100%.
And
Yep.
taking you even further back in time, it sounds like you knew finance was your route, but did you learn about money growing up?
I didn't have my mother and father, didn't they weren't super into investing. I didn't have a lot of resources growing up. I think that may have led me to have taken interest in investments, to want to be able to create some financial prosperity for my family.
Hmm.
But yeah, I started to develop interest kind of early. Have always really been curious about value, like how is value derived? How do you determine the
Mm,
value of a company? Why does the price of a stock go up and down? Like, from that early
right.
age when I was 8 years old, playing that game, we were thinking, what is that? Like, okay, the there's an explosion and an earthquake in Peru. Like, why the heck does the price of the, whatever, BHP, why is the price of that mining stock going down? And that to me was always just kind of fascinating. And similarly, I've always been fascinated by the construction of buildings. Like, what are all the pieces behind the walls and how does all that come together? So that explains
Yep.
explains my career path pretty well, I think, right?
Yeah. Yeah. Like almost like a big puzzle piece. Like, how does this all come together?
Yeah, and just how does it work? I mean, like, how does it work? Some people are interested in, why is the ocean the way it is, or why is space or the stars, or why do trees, grow the way that they do? And I've just always been interested in the value of things and in buildings and the
Hmm.
construction of buildings, design of buildings. Yeah, so I feel like I found a great place for myself as a result of, I think I just tried a lot of things, right? Like, I just tried
Yep.
things. Like, I remember my first conversation about development. I dated a girl when I was 21 years old. I was I had an agent. He was looking to get me a job playing overseas. And I went out, and for some reason, it was like the second or third, probably the third date, she decided to introduce me to her father. And he was a developer. He built my neighborhood where I grew up.
Oh my
And so
gosh.
it
Cool.
was kind of a weird experience talking to him because, like, when you're a kid, he was 30 years older than I was or whatever. And when you're a young person, you're talking to the person who built your house. Uh,
Yes.
it's a little intimidating. Um, but I walked away from the conversation thinking to myself, hey, I'm just as good as he had a beautiful home and lived in a beautiful part of town. And I lived in a middle class part of town. And I just remember thinking, I can have those things. I'm just as good as that guy. And, and that was the first time I ever considered being a real estate developer. It just like the switch went off and I was like,
Hmm.
oh, I can do that. Because I feel like that to me is the biggest piece that a lot of people don't necessarily get to, is the realization that they can manifest what they
Yep.
want in their life, right? They can make it real.
Right.
And that to me is just the most important part, right? If you believe you can do something, you can. If you don't think you
Right.
can, you never will. So having had that experience, that was pretty great. And then I worked in finance for a few years after basketball, and then I wanted to go to the best school that I could get into in grad school, and I started looking at MBA programs. And I, at some point, I realized I was competing with mostly engineering students, and a large part of the GMAT is a math component. And I
Hmm.
recognized that I've always been good at math, but I didn't spend 4 years in undergrad doing engineering math, right? And so those people had a major advantage over myself. What I did do was study finance and art history, and spent a lot of time drawing and imagining kind of
Mm.
things. And so I switched my focus from doing an MBA to a Master of Architecture. And I ended up going to school for 3.5 years at MIT and getting a Master of Architecture. And that was, uh, to me, an alternative route to getting into what I wanted to do. Having gone to a top school, it then opened doors that maybe wouldn't have been opened, and if I got to a mid-level MBA program or something. So yeah. So anyways, just some things that basically allowed me to kind of find my way, navigate through the mess that is life. That you kind of have to just keep adjusting your sails, right? Because you
Yep.
eventually get to where you're going, whatever that might be, and maybe you've changed the point that you're navigating to as well. Maybe you change the destination over time, but there's
Yeah.
nothing wrong with it as long as you continue to build. In my mind, one of the things my father said, I remember I was thinking about taking the job in construction, which I thought was a little bit tangential to development. And my father asked me, he said, "Oh, is this going to help you in terms of your aspiration to be in development?" And I was like, "Well, yeah. I mean, if I'm working in construction, I then know more about that space, and that will be
Right.
potentially accretive, complementary." And he looked at me and said, "Well, that's that's the answer. Take the job and go do that, and you'll learn more and continue to have opportunities in the future. So that's what happened. So yeah, hopefully that answers your question.
Yeah, no, thank you.
That's
Yeah. Aside from that game, actually, how did you learn about money then? Was it strictly through school? Did you do outside research? And if so, where would you encourage people to start?
I've read a lot of books about money. There's a book called The Ascent of Money, which is like the history of money, which I think is really
Oh,
interesting.
cool.
That's Neil Ferguson, I believe. That was a really great book. That's a book that's more history of money, which I think
Okay.
is interesting. History of value in some sense. But what else is? I mean, finance. Studying finance as an undergrad was key in that it taught me the theoretical basis for understanding how investments work, right? Understanding the time value of money, and how risk is priced into investments and duration, etc. So that to me is pretty fundamental. I talk to people all the time, and I say to them, it's something you can learn pretty quickly, and you can, once you understand the time value of money, you kind of understand finance other than a lot of terms and some equations. That's my opinion. But that being said, I'm glad I had it in the framework of an undergraduate degree, because it gave me confidence that I knew something. I read Rich Dad Poor Dad,
Nice.
Kiyosaki, I really enjoyed that. It's funny. And Dave Ramsey, I'm not convinced by. He's a little bit too simplistic in terms of his understanding of money. Kiyosaki, I think he's got really a great fundamental way of understanding how you can get into investments with a fairly straightforward kind of approach. I think he really sets up in that book. He really sets up the difference between someone who builds wealth and through buying assets, and someone who just has a job and a bunch of expenses and they never are able to escape that place. I think to me, okay, well, $100,000 is okay, but I kind of need 300,000 bucks. Okay. So if I need 300,000 bucks, 10% is a really high return metric. So maybe I only get 5. So if I get 5%, then I'm only getting 50,000 bucks on $1,000,000. Then I need $3 million to make 150,000 a year. And it's still not that much net, with inflation 25 years later, 24 years later, that's not that much. So like, I just remember looking at that thinking it's this insurmountable thing. And it's not if you play the long game. You have to just play
Right.
the long game, and there is no. So Kiyosaki, some of the stuff he says is a little wild and off the wall, and he's a little bit of a wacky dude, but I like what his goal is, which is to help people understand the basics of finance.
Yeah.
That's pretty
That's
out.
been a transformative book for a lot of people.
Yeah, absolutely. But yeah, I mean, I can go on and on, but there's a lot of good books out there that I think people just need to reach out and read, and certainly contact me.
Right.
I should put up a list of books that I like to read on my website.
Yeah, there you go. That's another good blog topic.
There we go.
And I know earlier you talked about who's on your team today and how you go about constructing that. But when you were on this journey, who would you say were important players on your team and who helped you? I don't know if you had a mentor or anything like that.
I had a series of very good bosses when I worked in corporate that I am very grateful for. But then getting into like actual development, like a lot of that has been, private investments. I worked at Samuels and Associates for a couple of years on a very large $1.5 billion mixed use project. That's where I really learned the business. And there's some great people there. No one in particular as necessarily a mentor, though. I just kind of went off on my own and started trying things, and I've had the fortune to connect with some great people. Have I had a mentor? Not necessarily one that's walked with me every moment of the way, holding my hand, but I've had just a fantastic series of people in my life and my business career that have been supportive and also helpful in terms of identifying potential landmines, and then
Yeah, yeah.
also kind of staking out what's next. So, but I think that's a big part of like figuring out your process is being able to say you got to own it, right? Like as much as I've
Yeah.
always loved the idea of a mentor, and I'm sure it's unbelievably valuable to have one person who just meets with you regularly and has a conversation. I think so much of it, I think there's a lot of shortcuts there, which are super helpful. But at least for
Hmm.
me, I think part of it for me is just owning the process. Like this is my process. I'm not like
Right.
there isn't one man or woman who's older than me and more experienced who's going to tell me exactly what I need to do, take me under the wing. It's more this is my process. I need to own it. I need to identify the right people to work with. I need to make some mistakes on my own, and
Yeah.
live my own journey. So I think
Right.
that's a lot of my story is kind of revolves around that. It's understanding and that is something you kind of have to make for yourself because if you don't own it, you won't do. Most people won't do it, right? Like
Right. Yeah.
if I didn't feel complete ownership over my investments in my business, I don't think I ever would have been motivated enough to
Hmm.
incentivized enough to go out and do something because it's too risky. If you don't
Right.
if you don't believe in yourself enough to go out and forge your own path, you're probably not an entrepreneur, and that's okay. But you're probably somebody who is more comfortable in a situation where you're working for a larger company or the government, and you can still do some great things in that context as well. But it's not entrepreneurship.
And it just reaffirms what we were talking about earlier. Your network is your net worth. Who are you? Who is your team? Who are you surrounding yourself with? So it
Absolutely.
all is coming full circle.
Yeah, 100%. And your network is comprised of people that you get to know over time and you keep in touch with. And it's not, I don't know, it's important to be strategic. It's important to identify people that, there could be mutually beneficial opportunities together. That's what business partnerships are. But I've never been one of those people that it's like, oh, I'm in a networking event. I've got like this laser beam focus and I've got to elbow everyone out of the way and get in
Yeah.
front of that person and say this spectacular thing because they're going to love me. Cause like, that's just like, I don't know. I feel like you got to push your own agenda. 100%. I believe in that. But then there's some amount of organic development that needs to take place. And that happens through developing an expertise and reputation for knowing what you're doing,
Yep.
So
Yeah. Great.
hopefully that
Great
helps
point.
with the networking conversation. But yeah, I
Yeah.
think
There you go. Well, I want to transition and end with
okay.
your investment portfolio. So, for example, if you got $1 million, how would you allocate it? Would it be diversified? I don't know if it would go all towards the business or things like that.
Well, first thing I would do is I would find a safe investment strategy to preserve that capital. Let's just say it's, I don't know, 60/40, equity and bonds, whatever your age is based on your age, that whole thing. I'd put it in a way that you can guarantee you're not going to lose much money. And that could be a variety of different ways, which we don't need to get into. That could be owning equities and, some type of puts, option strategy, or it could just be the 60/40 strategy I just talked about. In the meantime, while that money is invested, I would then I look to identify opportunities to build my own business, which again is just based on your interests. So I had experience in finance and architectural design, and ultimately development, which is why I started a real estate development company. The That was a logical thing. I think that to me is ultimately you want to have that money, that capital preserved, so that you can then funnel it into your main business, which will like you can grow money. You should be able to grow money much more efficiently on your own if you have a business that is viable and produces good opportunities for yourself, right? So cash flow. If you don't have a viable business, you will burn through that money really quickly, and then you'll say, "What did I do?" Right. So I think a lot of it has to do with, can you identify that business opportunity that you want to own, you want to build, you want to expand, and that's the tricky part, especially if you're just starting out. But then, going back to me, take the $1 million, put it somewhere safe, go find a really great real estate development opportunity, take that money, dump some portion of it into that first opportunity, let's say 25% into that first opportunity, work on that. A couple years later, hopefully that takes the $250,000, turns into $1 million, take another 250,000, continue to build and compound on itself that way. But I think it's all about investing in your own personal business once you've developed a strong foundation to do what it is you want to do within business. I don't personally. I mean, if you aren't of the entrepreneurial kind of mindset, then sticking it in a diversified mix of assets that pay over time and dividends and compound and everything, that's a perfectly fine way to go. But if you are an entrepreneur, ultimately you're going to put all your money or some meaningful portion of your net worth into your business because you believe in it. If you don't believe if you don't believe in yourself enough, to put your money in it, then you probably should go get a job.
Yeah. And are there any structures that you've come across for liability or insurance or anything that you had no idea about previously?
Yeah. I mean, there's deal structures that I've learned about that I didn't know existed, that you kind of only learn about with, I say deal terms. Yeah, there's like waterfall structures within deals, right? So if you're the general partner in a deal, and there's limited partners involved, there's typically some type of waterfall promote structure where you get paid for producing a certain amount of returns. You get paid a certain amount up to, let's say, 20% return to the LP, and then you take a more significant amount of the cash flow after that point. Like there's all those types of things are deal structures that I think you're referring to. Those pieces are elements that, unless you've worked in private equity, you don't have any reason to understand or be exposed to, and that ultimately, I think, drives a lot of the potential value for a young person starting out in that space. And so all that is very much something you can learn from a textbook for sure, but you can't. But experience helps. You can understand. You can understand the basic concept for sure. There's so many. It's really hard to list. You just kind of have to get into those places, right? So, like for example, if you and I were to do a deal, and let's just say you had no experience in development, but you had a piece of property you wanted to contribute as equity, you could say, okay, I want to contribute this as equity. Let's say the value is $1 million. I'm putting in, let's say, $3 million. The total equity value in the project's $4 million. And I don't know, let's just say we need to put up 20% equity on a $20 million deal. Then your 25% of that is going to represent, so there'll be some type of preferred return, right? So your contribution would be 25%. But once it got to the hurdle, which is typically can be 7 or 8% preferred return hurdle, once it got to that hurdle, your 25% might go to, I don't know, say 20%. And then mine would go from 75 to 80%, right? And so those adjustments to the returns are all driven by, it's all negotiated between the GP and the investors typically. But those are just the types of pieces that you kind of have to, you have to be, there's so many different angles and ways in which, like, you could easily negotiate with me, oh no, I'm not going to do that. You can't have that promote until you get to 15%, right? Because that's not fair. I'm not going to do the deal. I'll go find someone else to do it with. And so those are the things that you kind of go back and forth on. And over time, you learn that, you learn the ins and outs and what's market, and you learn to, if you maybe don't know what's market on a particular aspect of a deal, you learn who to call, you figure out who to call to get that input. So, but yeah, those are some of the elements I guess you'd have to think about.
Yeah, unfortunately, the greatest teacher is by doing. No shortcutting
Absolutely.
that one sometimes.
That's true.
All right. Well, let's end with my fire round.
All right.
So, first one is favorite restaurant.
Oh, favorite restaurant. I would pick Sundan New Asian in Tampa, Florida. It is an Asian fusion, Filipino inspired cuisine, and love the atmosphere, love the space, and I really like the founder. So it's a great restaurant, and I would recommend it.
Next time I'm in Tampa, I'll have to look it up. Second question. I know we both like traveling a lot, but what is your least favorite trip?
My least favorite trip, I'd have to pick. It's funny. A lot of people talk. I liked Iceland. I went to Iceland, and Iceland was, everyone kind of hyped it up. I think Iceland's a beautiful place and good people, but the water kind of smelled funny, and there was like the sun was up like 24 hours a day. I couldn't sleep. It was a little bit.
Oh wow,
It felt a little bit like the West Virginia of Europe. So I I would
that's
say
helpful.
that's on the list. I'd also, yeah, I mean that's something that I probably wouldn't go back. I've been asked about Iceland before, and I've been like, it's okay. Most of my travel experiences have been fantastic, so I struggle to find too much. I typically find something positive everywhere.
Yeah, it's a hard question. Last question is favorite piece of media to stay up to date on the news.
Well, that's such a moving target. I just found this really useful. It's an app. It's called Ren's News Alerts, and it basically scans the news for all the people that you're connected to, and if they're in the news or their company's in the news, it sends you kind of the headline, like this is like what's in the news, which is the latest thing. I think that's a super interesting RENS. That's a fairly new app that I've become aware of that I like a lot. But yeah, I'll say that one.
Okay. Yeah, very cool. I've never heard of it.
Yeah. Check it out.
Well, John, thank you so much for your time today. This has been a great conversation. Why and how should people reach out to you?
People should reach out to me if they have investment opportunities. I invest in small businesses, mostly in the real estate and design and construction space. I'm also always very interested in learning about new development opportunities, land or existing buildings, multifamily, industrial primarily, that I could potentially work with either the owner or purchase to redevelop. You can reach out to me directly on my LinkedIn profile, John Pugh, Pugh. Or you can go to my webpage, PughMGMT.com. That's Pugh Management. And yeah, I think you check me out there. You can always reach me through LinkedIn. And if you want to reach out directly, info at PughMGMT.com is a great email to reach me out.
Perfect. All right. Thanks again. Until next time. Adios.